Hello, friends. Today's topic is being house poor. Let's rant.
Right. Last October, I posted a video about why I decided to not go through with purchasing the home that I was going to.
She said something that I often tell my friends. I too was about to purchase a home last year, and I just couldn't go through with it because my main thing was that I don't want to be house poor. It did not make sense to me. And as a millennial, we know that buying a home is really the signature to your next chapter in life, right? It's a special moment. It's something that you should celebrate yourself in, and you should find it as a big moment. But a lot of us just feel when we weigh the pros and cons, having a home really means buying it, signing your name on the dotted line, and then being house poor. And yes, I'm someone who believes you should not live above your means and consider, going to a place that is more affordable, but I live in the DMV.
I bought a house when I was 26 and fell immediately into poverty. Okay, when I lived with my parents, I was living my best luxury lifestyle. I went to South Korea, bought a 2,000 plane ticket, didn't even blink twice. I went shopping, luxury goods, all that. Was traveling, was just, I was living it up. I felt rich. I had no bills. And I had a full-time 9-to-5 job. I was working as a nurse, okay? I was killing it. I bought my own house. That first mortgage payment came in and I was like, oh, this is a situation. But at first you think you can handle it, right? Like, what's a couple thou? What's a couple thou? I got it. But then the pipes in my 80-year-old home broke immediately as soon as I bought the house. Wiped out my savings. Then another pipe in a different area of the house broke. Okay, I'm struggling. Okay, I need help. Then my neighbor's pipe, it was a twin house, her pipe broke. And she didn't believe that her pipe broke, but her pipe broke on my side of the house. So all of that water that was coming down was spraying into my home. And then my water heater broke. When I tell y'all, I went from living in the lap of luxury to destitute immediately. Now, don't get me to fooling y'all, because it was worth it in the long run, because that house is now worth like 2 times what it was worth then. So I'm actually doing pretty good. But at the time, when I tell you I was struggling, I had to go to my parents every other day for dinner because your girl could not feed herself.
So what do you actually do when you're house poor? So you just bought a house, the upkeep on it, the mortgage on it, all the interest payments, everything is so expensive. Let's say you were renting before for like $2,300 and then you bought a house and now you're paying $3,300, $4,000 a month. What do you do? I think this comes down to your individual situation, how long you prepare to live in that exact house. Usually what happens is if people can find a better rental deal, they'll either just go and rent. You're better off like literally go to a cheaper rental, renting it out if you can. Let's say you got a big house that you don't really need, that you like over purchased, like you bought something too big for yourself. You can always consider renting it out, but a lot of times that could be problematic because if you're in really tenant-friendly states, you actually might get a problem tenant that causes you a lot of damage. So at that point, you can decide 2 things that is possible. One is potentially short-term rentals. Maybe you're in an area that allows short-term rentals, like an Airbnb. You can rent it out on the short-term market where you can get a really nice return on your money and not have to deal with the pain and suffering of a bad long-term tenant that has all the power of the legal powers that be behind them. And then number 2 is you can actually consider selling, because unless you are planning to hold this property from 5 to 10 years, it's just going to be headache and pain and cost all the way up till then, right? Because your interest, so much of your housing payment is not going to building equity. It's going to pay interest, and you're paying taxes, and you're potentially paying co-op and condo fees. So at a certain point, you really have to think like, am I willing to keep putting in something called sunk cost at that point? It's just money that you're throwing away. Like, am I willing to do a sunk cost, or can I find a way to find cheaper housing that actually is more or less like half of what I would have sunk into this primary? And at that point, rent looks like a really good deal. And there are rental deals really all the time. There are landlords that are looking to rent. There are big buildings that are getting set up looking for good tenants. Like, there's a lot of rentals available if you know where to look. So just do your math, do your cost benefit analysis, do your risk analysis. you might need to sell. You may be able to convert it to a short-term rental, or you do the third thing, which is just put up with it and keeping house poor. I mean, all of them are options. So that's the thing. If you can afford it, you can keep carrying a dead house for as long as you like until you finally one day inflation catches up. But that could take a while. Of course, you can always get roommates. But a lot of people who buy a primary, they're not looking to get a roommate. A lot of people who get a primary have this like vision of like owning and this romanticized notion about it. And they were not planning on getting roommates. That is not what they wanted to do. They did not want to be this like roommate landlord situation, which can get very awkward and unsafe for women who just don't feel comfortable with that sort of situation. And you might have heard horror stories of like squatters living in your home and not leaving. That is also a potential risk. Once they get a certain amount of time into your house, I mean, there's really very little recourse you have against them depending on the tenant laws of your city/state. So nothing is that easy. People are like, oh, well, you can just rent it. Well, you can just get a roommate. It's not that simple. These are people that you're dealing with, and they could be really difficult and terrible to work with. That is why I mentioned selling. Maybe selling, if you're that type of person that just does not want to put up with it, selling could be a good option, to be real. You might not even want to go through the headache it costs to be a short-term rental host. That life's not easy either. I own a bunch of Airbnbs, and it is not a cakewalk. Real estate is work. That's my point. Be very careful before you buy.
A lot of people cannot make progress financially because they are house poor and they probably don't even know it. Being house poor is when you own a home that you cannot afford. What does that look like? When you have a payment that is a very big percentage of what you make monthly and all you can afford basically is to pay the mortgage. By the time you cover all your house expenses, you are basically left with nothing. I think it's important to talk about this because people are under the impression that as long as you own a home, you're winning. And that is not the case. If you are owning a home stressed out because by the end of the month, you have nothing left, you cannot afford that. That is what we call you bought too much house. With your monthly income, you should be able to pay your mortgage, set money aside, invest, basically still have a life, right? And not feel like you're drowning and not feel like you can't breathe. The biggest, smartest way to do this is waiting to buy a house when you are ready. Not when the pressure is, when are you going to buy a house? When are you going to buy a house? Oh, everyone buys a house when they get married. Why aren't you? No, you need to buy a house when you're ready. Doing this when you're ready looks like this. You should be debt free. You should have an emergency fund, and you should aim to have a really good down payment. 5, 10, 15, 20% down. And that will give you margin. That will give you breathing room. That will make sure you are doing this the right way. So don't let anyone pressure you into this. Buying a house is the biggest expense you're ever going to make, at least for most of us. Make sure you're doing this the right way.
Buy a house to be house poor with little money left over, or rent and be able to save money each month. What do you think? Comment down below, and thank you for watching.